Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Techie is In. I'm so excited that you're able to join me today. And today's topic has to do with probably the activity we do the most. What's that? No, not that. Browsing. Pretty much stop and think about it. Probably today, when you sat down to watch this show, the first thing you did was fire up your browser. And with more and more things being stored in the cloud and more services being offered online, our browser is our go-to use all the time tool. Maybe an even more important decision than which operating system you might be on. So on today's episode of The Techie is In, we'll explore some choices, some criteria for picking the best browser for you, and see what's on the horizon. There are actually new browsers coming along, and a few of them you may not have heard of. And we'll cover all that in today's episode. A few housekeeping details before we get started. There are a multitude of ways that you can watch this show. First of all, you could be watching via the Google event, and if you are, welcome. The downside to that is I'm not currently checking the chat feed over there, so we'll miss any messages, but we'll answer all of them after the show is off the air. If you want to get the best experience, you can join us on the webinar interface that I'm using. And if you signed up via email, then you would have had that link, and that's where you're at. That chat box I'm able to see, and will also ask your opinion a couple of times during the show. And it's also through that you'll be able to join me live if you have a question. The third way to watch is on a mobile, and to watch on a mobile device, you will need the special link. It'll either be in the Google event, or if you are watching via the webinar interface, you will see it over as a sticky posted on the right-hand side of your screen. So now that we've got all that out of the way, watch from wherever suits you best. The experience will be slightly different depending on the method you choose, but I just want to let you know we're really happy. I'm really happy to have you on board. Okay, browsers, what's the big deal? So first, let's just stop and think about it. This is something you may have never even thought about. I did a little informal polling before I started the show, and amongst 10 or 15 people that I asked, most of them never thought about the browser. They used the one that came with their computer or operating system by default. So if you're on an Apple, you might use Safari. If you're on Windows, you might be using Internet Explorer. And if you're on a mobile, you could be using whatever browser came installed with your mobile browsing system and your phone or tablet. So a lot of us don't give a big thought to this very important piece of software that we use every day. And today we'll explore a few of the decisions you'll need to decide on in order to make the best choice for you. I want to share with you a really interesting statistic that I found out. Just a second. And this is pretty intriguing. We're spending a lot of time using this, so let's make sure we've made the best decision for us. And we can also see that, for example, the world of browsers is changing. 3-4 years ago, Internet Explorer clearly led the pack, and more people started to explore alternatives. And as you can see now, Google Chrome actually has the lion's share of the browser market. So that's kind of interesting. And we can also see over time that this has really changed. And again, this runs over the past 3 years. So I just thought that was really interesting that more and more changes are coming and we're not even really paying attention to them. So that's kind of cool. And I've got a poll running on the side, so let me know which browser you're currently using. It'd be very interesting to know. I see we've got Chrome in the lead at the moment. And let's take a look at some of the key things you'll want to think about when deciding on your browser. Okay, let's start with the important part. 1, If you're using Internet Explorer, please stop immediately. It's not the best choice. It suffers from all kinds of historical issues and frankly is the most likely, in my opinion, to cause you to be infected by malware or to be hijacked. And it's for the simple fact that it was the leader for such a long time. And because of older capabilities, it is still the most vulnerable. So if you're using IE, this session is really for you. It's time to think about a different browser. I left IE many years ago, and my next browser of choice was actually Firefox. And I love Firefox for a whole bunch of different reasons. One, I'm a huge fan of open source software, and Firefox is an open source piece of software. That's number one. Number two, it has a lot of built-in features and probably the most extensive plugin library and ability to customize the browser experience. And I like that. I'm all about the personalization. I like to bling my browser out with tools that make my life easier. And Firefox really gives me a lot of capability to do that. I happened to notice after a while that it was getting a little sluggish and decided to explore Google Chrome. And Google Chrome was actually fairly new at the time and thought I would check it out. And over the past year, Google Chrome has become my default browser of choice. Though truth be told, I usually have them both open. And my dirty little secret is I probably usually have about 15 tabs open in each browser. It's a really bad habit, but we'll talk about my attention deficit disorder some other time. Today, we want to focus on picking a good browser for you. Any good browser will allow you to do the following things. It will allow you to customize the environment. It will allow you to add in new features using either what might be called add-ons, plugins, or extensions. So it will allow you to expand the capabilities of the default piece of software by adding in these extra little, I call them pieces of bling. And they will do things that your browser was not intended to do, but does have the capability to do. And then the third thing that's really important would be how cross-platform is it? Can I use it on multiple devices? And can my activity follow me from device to device? For example, if you are logged into the Chrome browser, you can set it so that if you move from one machine to another or from a desktop or laptop to your phone, all your open tabs and sessions can travel with you. And so that's kind of cool if you are in the midst of a project and suddenly need to run out the door but want to work on it later. You can have it set so all those open tabs come with you onto your tablet or smartphone. And then the third really big issue is privacy. Privacy and more privacy. So when you're using a browser, is your privacy protected to the level that you are interested in? And I'm not going to go off on a big rant about internet privacy and that's a personal decision, but don't stick with the defaults and make sure that whatever your choice is allows you to browse privately if you so choose. So for example, in both Firefox and Chrome, there's the ability to open what's known as an incognito window, or a window where your browsing activity is not being actively tracked. Now, realize that your employer and other people can still figure out where you've been. But what this means is that the little tracking cookies that are all around the web are not activated when you've chosen to browse in that mode. It's not tying your activity to your profile or to you as a person. So that's really kind of cool and could be very important. If privacy is very important to you, look at one of the most popular anonymous browsers, which is known as the Tor browser. And that will pretty much block any of your activities. So that is an alternative. I don't know how many of you would be interested in that, not knowing if that's a key concern, but if that is a concern, look for a browser that has that built in. Next, let's look at some of the basic functions that you can have happening in your browser. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and let's take a look at a couple of the key things that you'll want to think about when deciding on a browser. And I'm going to use Google Chrome for my example, because one of the first things I want to show you is one of my favorite add-ons. So right now we're looking at what I see when I open my browser. One of the first things you'll want to check in your browser is what happens when you open the browser for the first time, and you control that usually in your settings. And in Google, you will find those settings here. And the first thing is what happens on startup, as you can see right here. What happens on startup? Now, I happen to use a very wonderful extension called Speed Dial 2, and that's what you saw when we opened my screen. I'll go back and talk about that in just a second. But you have a choice of opening, continue where you left off. So if you closed your browser and you had 5 or 6 tabs open, it's going to open with those exact same tabs, or open to a specific set of pages or pages. So if every day the first thing you want to do is check Facebook, Twitter, and read the weather, you could set it up so that those 3 tabs would be opened automatically each day when you turned on your computer. The next thing is themes, and this is your ability to make your browser look pretty, and that's always a good thing to do. And remember, almost all of the major browsers have these same capabilities. Firefox calls them personas instead of themes, and I can't tell you what Apple Safari calls them because I'm just not an Apple user. And Safari is another popular browser. It had about 10% of the market, as we saw in the earlier slide. And I do believe there are some sorts of plugins and customization. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong. So that's a really important thing. This is also the place you go when your browser is not opening to the page that you want. If you've accidentally opened a malicious site and you've been what we call hijacked, and every time you open your browser, it's going to a page you do not want, you can often correct that by going into the on startup pages and change it to a different selection. So I could go ahead and set this page and say open to Google, and hopefully it would save me and take me back so that when I opened, I would end up on the Google site that I wanted. So that's just one way of doing it that can help get you out of a problem if you've been captured in one. I happen to like what they call Speed Dial 2, and all this is what would be called a visual bookmarker. In other words, I am able to set up a bunch of separate pages. As you can see, we're on my home page now. I have a learning page for all the things I'm mastering. I have my business page where I have all the key pieces of online software I'm using to run my business. I have a bunch of tools or other services that I use occasionally. And so as you can see, it just gives me a beautiful, quick, and easy interface into the different areas that I am likely to go when I open my browser. And so that's a really good one, and I really like it. And again, you can do a similar thing in Firefox. Firefox actually, by default, will show you some visual bookmarks, but it's the most recent sites that you've used instead of you controlling which ones are on there. But of course, there's an add-on that allows you to sort that out. Another thing I really want to talk about in using your browser has to do with storing passwords in your browser. This is a really bad idea, and I really suggest that you use a third-party password manager. And today's gotcha actually has to do with that particular item. And I'm going to actually show you this in Firefox. So let's just switch browser windows for just a moment. And let me share something slightly different. So here, if I go into options in Firefox, this is why I'm showing you, and this is true for most browsers. and I go into the security area, and I go into saved passwords, there's the ability to show every password that you want. You'll notice there are no passwords saved in my browser. But you can try this on your own machine, and you will discover the passwords that you have saved. And anyone that wants to can see your passwords. If you do insist on using your browser to show passwords, you can set a master password so that at least they are not visible. So go ahead and make sure that if you are going to use this, that you've set a master password, please. Otherwise, you're in for a big surprise when your account is easily compromised. So that's a good one, and that's your gotcha for the week, is make sure that your passwords are truly secure. I'm going to switch back over to Chrome now. And show you one of my other favorite tools. So this tool, so we've looked at speed dial and we've looked at getting a password manager. If you're going to use one, I actually would recommend LastPass. It's the one I prefer, only because it's the one I've been using. I'm going to actually end the current poll, and I've got another question for you guys. And that question is, are you using browsers and extensions currently on your computer? So are you using those now? So I'd love to know your thoughts on that. And today's favorite is one called One Tab. So I told you I have a propensity for leaving a lot of tabs open. And my current favorite extension has to do with One Tab. What that does is it takes all my open tabs and immediately and neatly puts them into one tab for me. And now I have a history, and you can see it just saves them all over time so that I can easily get back to them. So that's another really great extension that I really enjoy. And the last thing that I want to talk about today has to do with the new password managers that are coming along. So, not new password managers, excuse me, new browsers that are coming. Too many things I'm thinking about at the same time. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So what's really exciting is Internet Explorer is getting a 100% facelift. After all these years, Microsoft is going to give it another shot, and they have a new one coming out, and it's going to be called Edge, and it's due out shortly with Windows 10 and will then be available. And from what I'm reading, they've gone in and ripped out a lot of the underlying issues and will be making it more standardized. So right now, when people are writing websites, they have to do all these extra things in order to get Google or get Internet Explorer to work, and that problem will be gone. It's also one of the most popular browsers is a browser called UC. It's out of India. It's making a lot of inroads because it's very cross-platform and works on tons of mobile phones, not necessarily only smartphones. So older phones can have little browsers built in, and it's gained popularity. Unfortunately, they just found out this weekend that a lot of the data that was being collected was being shared with third-party sites, especially in China, without people's permissions. So before you take any browser on, make sure that you've explored what those privacy options are and where your data is going. And then lastly is another new browser called Yandex. It's out of Russia and is actually the 6th most popular browser in the world. I have a little hesitation about any sites in Russia due to the nature of the Russian bot network, but I don't want to tar Yandex with that just because they're from Russia. They could be perfectly legitimate. It's, again, a new and upcoming browser that if you're looking for something slightly different, you might want to explore. And so that's what we have going on there. The last thing I just wanted to mention about using your browser, and we'll do one last quick screen share. And that is this little trick. When you're going to a website, if I want to go to Netfatuation, yes, it's partially filled in, but let's say it's a site I haven't been to before and I want to go to CNN. I can start to type it, but I can also hit the Control and the Enter key, and you'll notice that with using those two secret keystrokes of Control and Enter after putting a website name into the browser bar, it will automatically take me to that site without me needing to type in the www or the .com. One of my favorite little tricks. And it's hard to believe, but I'm looking at the clock and I see our time together is up again for today. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have and that it's been useful in upping your tech IQ. I trust that you got at least one practical takeaway that you can use right away to make your tech life a little bit easier. Please know that the Techie is in is here for you, here to take your questions, and is here to help you in embracing technology in your life. I look forward to seeing you next week on the next episode. Have a fabulous day, and thanks again for tuning in.